My name is John White. Josh Cutting has asked me to do this video of introduction to the Songs of Ascent, namely Psalms 120 through to 134. The Psalms were written between 1000 BC and 400 BC, and once the exiles had returned from Babylon, they were compiled into a hymn book of worship for use in the Second Temple. They were words of lament and of praise that were appropriate responses to God. In the book of Leviticus, we read about a number of feasts or festivals that had to be observed. There were three important sacred feasts that required the worshippers or pilgrims to travel up to Jerusalem. There was the Feast of Passover, there was the Feast of Weeks or First Fruits, and the Feast of Tabernacles or Harvest. The Songs of Ascent, these Psalms 120 through to 134, were sung by the worshippers and pilgrims as they travelled across the country on their journey up to Jerusalem, to Mount Zion. In addition, these 15 psalms were sung as the Levites and other worshippers would ascend the 15 steps into the temple complex. So they were sung going to worship God, and they were sung entering God's presence in worship. What we see and read and hear in these Songs of Ascent is inspiring, change-oriented and challenging. There is an intentionality that offends the stationary, the static and the stagnant. This journey to Jerusalem, this purposeful journey, is empowering because it offends the prevailing culture of consumerism, of taking from God what he is not giving. It is costly in time and effort. They reflect things that are faced in everyday life. The intentionality of these Songs of Ascent breaks the monotony of worship, which is an activity without purpose. It breaks the apathy in worship, which is an activity without passion. And it breaks the contentment in worship, which is an activity without power. Without purpose, passion, and power, our worship is like a film set, just a two-dimensional facade. I want to encourage you to look out for the following themes in the Songs of Ascent: God's faithfulness and power. They could look back over past experiences and see just how faithful God is to his promises and how powerful he is. They could know and trust and rely on God's covenant promises, and we see this again and again through these Songs of Ascent. God's covenant promises and faithfulness. When things get difficult and tricky and when they're facing difficult situations, hope and salvation is found alone in God. And it is God's peace and grace that enables them and that provides and strengthens them as they go through their difficult times. They realize and they see through these particular Songs of Ascent the importance of dependence on God and living in the fear of God. And yet it is always God's protection and preservation that is around, that is there, that they know, that has kept them safe and secure. The psalmists and the people themselves, of course, know about their own sin. They are all too real and aware of their own sin. And so these Songs of Ascent speak of God's forgiveness, his grace, his mercy and his love. And because of knowing and receiving his forgiveness, there's hope, therefore, in the greatness and majesty of God. You know, he's a God who makes promises and keeps promises. And then with all this going on in terms of God's covenant promises and his faithfulness, there's this incredible psalm that speaks about the unity of God's people and the importance of that unity. And these Songs of Ascent are all about ultimately the offering of worship and praise to God, of true worship, of true praise to God. And so I would like to sort of end this little introduction by saying that it seems to me that the songs of ascent are really encouraging us to live intentionally and purposefully for God. It's about living expectantly and obediently. That whatever journey we're on, it's a journey that we can take with purpose and intention. But it's a journey that ultimately is about worshipping God, and whether we worship God in our church meetings, in our whatever, but also in our work, in our hobbies, in our day-to-day lives. It's about intentionality. It's about being purposeful in our focus on God and on our worship of God. It's about living expectantly and obediently. These are amazing psalms, and I really wish you well as you study them, and I pray that it will be a significant time of challenge, of change, of a real blessing upon you as you just get into the amazing truth that's disclosed in these psalms, that you may live your lives intentionally and purposely for God.